Hi, Maria. How are you?
Hey, Monique. I'm doing good. So what's going on with you, honey?
Well, this week we are talking about honesty on the podcast. And I have a question for you. Are you always honest with yourself, or have you ever kept a secret from somebody?
Recently, I had to be honest with one of my friends who asked me if I was getting a vaccine. And I told her I wasn't resonating with me. And she really got upset. And in those moments, I really felt inside of me, wow, should I have not been so honest? But usually I might sacrifice myself to not speaking my truth. So it was very important for me to be honest.
I'm glad. Well, I am going to go get this podcast started. I love you.
I love you, honey.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to More with Monique. My name's Monique DeBose. I'm a singer, writer, and spiritual coach, and my passion in life is to inspire women to choose more for themselves. Today's episode is all about choosing more honesty. Now, most of us, at least those of us who are listening now, think of ourselves as being honest. We don't lie, we don't cheat, we don't steal, we have integrity, we're loyal, we're fair. Honesty is synonymous with being a good person. We always tell the truth. But do we though? Sometimes it's more difficult to be honest with and about ourselves. And that's what we'll be talking about today. So let's get to it. Let's meet our first guest. Jay Orozco is here to share a heartfelt story about her experience of coming out as a lesbian to her super religious mother in front of her entire family. Jay and her wife, Eden, share the pure joy of their relationship on Instagram. Their handle is EdenXJ, and they also operate a clothing line called Creature of Habit.
My name is Jay, and I choose more honesty.
There's definitely more space today for people to express their sexuality, their identity, how they identify as female or male. Talk to me about coming out.
Man, it was scary. I didn't come out by choice. I came out because I needed to, not because I was ready. I came out when I was 16 years old, and my cousin, who happened to be basically my best friend at the time, told me a secret. One day, she basically confided in me and said, hey, I think I like girls. It was so relieving to know that someone else also had feelings just like I did, and B, that I was able to confide in her and tell her how I was feeling, and having girl crushes or thinking that a girl was pretty in school, it wasn't this scary monster under the bed.
Wow. That's really a fortunate experience, because I am imagining there are quite a few girls, boys who may have those feelings and feel like there's no space. But I actually feel like also in 2021, even though we do have a culture that I feel like is more accepting, we have somebody in the cabinet of the United States government who is openly gay and married to his husband. Even though we have those role models and that more in the light, that doesn't necessarily mean it's easier.
Exactly. And she came to me and she told me her big secret. And then we started kind of like this secret bond within our friendship, where I was able to come to her, when no one was around, and vice versa. She can come to me and say, hey, I'm feeling this way, or, I'm going through something, or we broke up, or whatever happens when you're 15 and in love,
Sure. Yes.
But that was awesome. And that stayed a secret for the next 6 months, didn't talk about it. And somehow she was walking her girlfriend home from school, and my aunt so happened to be driving on that street that day.
Her mom?
Yeah, her mom. So she caught her basically hand in hand with this girl, and it was like the end of the world. My aunt just lost it, was super livid, told the whole family, and then it was a family affair. And my poor cousin was basically put on the spotlight for everyone to judge and everyone to critique. And it wasn't until a family gathering, we were all sitting at a table. I'll never forget it. It was 20 of us. I have 13 aunts and uncles and a million cousins. So it was this giant family gathering, and my mom, in the middle of dinner, decides to get up and start berating my cousin in front of everyone, basically calling her any name under the sun.
What was happening with your cousin in that moment? Like, as you're watching this?
She was shattered. She started crying. She, kept asking my mom to stop, kept asking my uncles and my aunts, who just kept railing on her about how like she's going to hell and it's a big sin. And I can't believe she did this to the whole family. And like, who do you think you are? You don't even know what you're into. Like everything you could think of.
It wasn't even about saving your cousin's soul. And I'm doing air quotes. It was more also about like family's pride out in the world.
Exactly. And it was just a mix of everything. It was like sexuality, religion, pridefulness within the family, shame to the family. It was just so much. And I remember sitting there and just seeing her bawl in emotions. And you can tell that she stopped fighting back because she felt overpowered by everyone. I can only imagine. And so as soon as my mom stopped talking, I got up and I was like, if you're going to call her all those things, you might as well say them to me because I'm also a lesbian. And it was like she saw a ghost. She couldn't even fathom. Her thought process was just like, what are you saying? And she thought I was bluffing. She was like, you're just saying that because you're covering for your cousin. Like, sit down. You don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, no, I do. And this isn't right. You can't just berate her like that. You can't say these mean and hurtful things to her and think it's okay. And if you are, then you might as well direct it to me as well.
So what's happening inside your body? It sounds like you had no conscious awareness that you were going to stand up and be moved to speak honestly in front of everybody.
Yes.
So what do you remember in that moment inside your body?
I remember seeing red as soon as I saw my mother basically shame my cousin for who she was and who she was trying to be. And I felt very sick to my stomach. Like just sitting there and not doing anything isn't who I am. And I would feel so bad to just kind of sweep that under the rug or pretend it wasn't happening. I don't think I would be able to live with myself. I think it was kind of like a fight or flight mode.
Absolutely. So it wasn't about like, I'm like this too, as much as it was about you are being cruel to somebody, not even somebody who I love. I know you loved your cousin, but it sounds like just you're somebody who stands up for people making kind, loving choices.
No, that's exactly spot on. Yeah. I just felt I had to do it and I had to voice it regardless of the outcome and the repercussions after the fact.
So what happened when your mom's like, no, you're just bluffing or you're just covering for your cousin? And you're like, no, this is real.
I was like, no, I am a lesbian and I love women. And I think we need to have a conversation about it. Mind you, this was in front of everyone. There was no behind the doors or upstairs in a bedroom hiding away. My mom, she was so upset. She cursed me out and then was like, we have to go. And then just like grabbed me, yanked me by my arm and we left the party. And on the whole way home, she was just like, how dare you ruin my night? How dare you say these foul things? You are not that. And that whole night, I remember I like went to sleep crying because I was so upset. But I also felt relieved. I felt like this weight had been lifted off my shoulders that I had been carrying around for some time. And I felt like, okay, I can breathe. It's only going to get better, or at least I thought it was. Mm-hmm. And that next morning I woke up and I wrote her like a 5-page letter, just explaining everything. Like, this is how I feel. I'm really sorry it happened the way that it happened. If I could do it over, I don't think I would, because you guys were bashing my cousin who I absolutely love and who has the right to love whoever she wants to love, period.
Yeah.
I handed that letter to her in the morning and she looked me dead in the eye and ripped it in half. Didn't even read it.
Oh, I'm imagining there was like terror in your heart as well.
Totally. Because that was my truth. That 5-page letter had everything in it. And she didn't even bother to read the first sentence. It was a straight rip in half, get this out of my face. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to school that morning and just crying on the way to school because I was in my feels. I was so emotional because I was trying to show my mom who I was and she just wouldn't have it. It's almost like another metaphor for the closet. It's like I'm trying to come out and you just keep closing the door.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was very traumatic. Then when I got home that night, my mom had booked me a ticket. She was like, you're going to go live with your dad, who you haven't seen since you were 7, in a foreign country that you've never been to. To me, this man was a stranger because I was 16. And so she hands me a ticket and she's like, I've packed your bags. You're leaving tomorrow morning. I'm going to check you out of school. You can't be here because you need to be fixed. Like, you need to go live with your dad and figure out who you are. And if you are a lesbian, don't bother coming back. But if you can fix this while being away, then maybe there's a possibility of you returning back home.
That's huge. Your mother was so distraught and so caught up in beliefs like that she had to send you away, and to send you to a place that you had no concept of, no safety, no...
Absolutely nothing. My dad was remarried at the time with 3 kids. So I'm essentially the other woman's daughter coming into this home, which wasn't easy. It was horrible. My stepmom hated me. And now putting myself in her shoes, I'm like, yeah, I probably would be upset too. I don't think I would be as crazy as my stepmom was, but I think there would be some resentment if like this random kid comes to my house. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a messed up situation overall.
So what was the conversation when you arrived? Obviously, your mom must have communicated to your dad.
It was wild. So apparently my mom spoke to my dad while I was at school. She begged him to take me. He's like, okay, I will deal with this. Mind you, my dad is the most manliest man ever. Like, he carries around like guns and he's like all about traditional roles, women in the kitchen, men go to work. So I'm just going from like a super religious Catholic home to now like a super machismo, like foreign countries. It was just like mind blowing.
How did it feel knowing that when you spoke your truth, when you chose more honesty, there were such repercussions?
I felt like maybe I shouldn't be speaking my truth. I felt very shamed. I felt very angry about this not playing out the way that I assumed it should have. In a healthy family dynamic, I felt like this should have been a conversation. This should have been maybe family therapy. This should have been some sort of rebuilding.
Were you having these thoughts at 16, or is this you looking back as an adult?
I've always been the black sheep of my family. I've always been pro therapy. I've always been all about, getting through generational traumas. But at 16, I remember specifically thinking that, like, this is not how it was supposed to play out. Why is this happening to me?
Did it stop you from speaking your truth more or being honest, or did it change how you did it?
The whole time that I was with my dad, I was very quiet and reserved, and I was very to myself because I felt like I couldn't speak my truth and I have to bite my tongue if I want this to be less painful.
How long were you with your dad?
I was in Guatemala for about a year.
Well, what happens when you come back, and what's your relationship now with your mother, and what happened with your cousin?
So I came back, and at this time I was 17. I basically gave my mom an ultimatum. I said, you can either leave me here and I will never speak to you again because this is traumatic and I don't know if I can forgive you, or you can get me a plane ticket and I can go back home and we can figure this out. But if you leave me, there will be no repairs. Like, it's just done. And I'm okay with that. Like, my conscience is clear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she really heard me. So she sent a ticket and it came back. How my relationship is with my mother now, my mom is a very funny person. As soon as I came back, I graduated high school and I found a part-time job. I moved out and I said, I'm not going to talk to you unless you realize that this isn't a phase and this is who I am and you accept my lifestyle, period.
Mm-hmm.
And it took her another year to come around. She reached out and she said, okay, I want to be supportive. I want to understand this lifestyle. I want to be part of your life. And it was great. It was like night and day. And that's why I'm a firm believer that if people want to change, they can. It's the wanting. That's the most important part.
Yeah.
And I think my mom is like a perfect example of that. Someone super homophobic who is now like my support system and absolutely adores who I am.
Tell me about your cousin.
My cousin's awesome. She is now in a relationship with a man.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. No judgment. She went through a period where she dated women and now she's with a man, but we're still tight. Literally 2 weeks ago, she called me because she remembered that day. And she was like, I'm like so thankful that you stood up for me. Like nobody stood up for me that day. And it still resonates in my heart that you did that.
What would you say to anyone who is facing that choice of, I could choose more honesty in this moment, or I could choose to deny or neglect or pretend? What do you have to say to women who find themselves in those situations?
I think that it's always easier to just not speak the truth. If I'm honest, I think that's why we choose to not be honest, is because it can be heavier and it can be a deeper conversation. It can be a heavier conversation. It can be a painful conversation to have, but I think that there's so much importance in just speaking your truth and being who you are authentically. The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it.
Hey, it's Monique here. I am excited for you to experience my brand new album, You Are the Sovereign One, which comes out August 27th. Last week, I shared a preview of the new single, Human Condition, featuring the amazing spiritual coach, Preston Smiles. And I've been overwhelmed by the love you have shown to this song and its message. It really speaks to owning all the human condition, letting go of the expectations of perfection and standing in your true and sometimes messy, authentic glory. Would you like to master your own human condition? Well, if so, I've got you covered. When you pre-save my single Human Condition right now on any streaming service, you will automatically be able to receive the first module of a 7-week program I've created, You Are the Sovereign One, the course, for free. You see, with me, every song is a lesson, and I want you to experience all the lessons of the new album. For details around how to download the first module of the course for free and more news on the album, make sure to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at I am Monique DeBose. Hi, it's Monique DeBose, and this is More with Monique. I feel like a lot of times we women aren't honest with ourselves about many aspects of our life. Sometimes it's a matter of self-preservation. Sometimes it's a matter of just not being ready to deal with something that's scary. My next guest is a dear friend who has been through a lot of joy and a lot of heartache. First losing her husband to cancer and then losing her son, who took his own life. And she amazingly managed to choose more honesty at every turn. Her name is Johan Beckles, and this is her story.
Hi, I'm Johan, and I choose more honesty.
So I wanted to talk to you today about your son. And when you look back, were you honest with yourself about Yusuf and his mindset and where his emotional state was?
We noticed a spiraling of his behavior. He was in his early 20s, around 2021, but we did not recognize what it was. And then all of a sudden, I would say after my father's death, and we were traveling to Florida for the funeral, and he was talking in a way that we've never noticed before. Mm-hmm. And we thought, well, maybe it's nerves. I don't know. Still did not connect it with mental illness.
So how did it escalate?
He found a paper bag, and in it was items of my dad's. And I don't remember what they were. It's just that he went off and he says, leave my grandfather's things. I just went off. Everyone was in shock. We just couldn't understand what was wrong.
And are you thinking at this time, I'm touching back to that honesty piece and moments when we are honest with ourselves or a situation, were you having thoughts that were coming saying something's not right here?
Right, but I couldn't identify it as mental illness because I never experienced anyone with it. So that didn't come to my mind. I just thought, well, what's going on? Is it drug related?
Was it denial at all? And I hate to ask that question, but I'm checking in.
I don't know. I can't say at that time I was in denial because, again, I've never had experience with someone who was mentally ill. So it just didn't enter my mind. I just thought, this is rebellious. This is weird.
When was he first diagnosed?
In 2005.
I'm wondering, how did you take the diagnosis, and were there parts of you that wanted to push back or say that this can't be possible or anything like that?
Oh, no, not at all. I just wanted to fix it. As I reminisce now, from the time he was showing signs of paranoia, but he was projecting it onto other friends. He was saying, so-and-so, another friend of his is experiencing depression. He was throwing around the word depression. As soon as he said that, I started my research to find out where can we get help for him. Because I asked him, do you want help? And he said, yes.
Sounds like all of you really were choosing more honesty when something that was a surprise.
Yes. And at that time, it was still taboo. But I was not that person to say, oh, this can't happen in our family, or we won't talk about that. I'm not that. I've always been honest with my kids. I've told my kids every crazy thing I've done as a teenager. They know all my flaws.
Did you have a moment where, even though you were being honest, it was overwhelming?
It was overwhelming. It caused me a mini stroke. But I was determined. But things got a little worse. After the psychologist noted that he was in a deep depression, she sent him to a psychiatrist. I didn't realize they don't look at the brain. They are just writing up prescriptions.
Did he take the meds?
He took them, but it put him in a fog. He wasn't able to follow through with the prescription, when to take it. He just started walking the street and self-medicating. And when I went to see the state of his room, I saw pills and open, another one open, there was no consistency. And that's a problem. I mean, it's such a hard disease, even for the experts to diagnose and treat, because they're dependent on what the patient is telling them. The patient is in a fog.
Yeah.
The patient can't really articulate what's going on. So I joined NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness, that address parents of adult children who are going through mental illness, because there's a problem when they're not giving you consent to help them take custody of their affairs and what have you. And at this point, he became more dependent on street drugs. Then he became addicted to anything that would take him out of this fog.
Yeah.
And he would just, as I said, he would be missing for weeks or days. He was living homeless. We were walking up and down Santa Monica, turning over blankets where homeless men or women were sleeping to see who was that, And then the arrest started for petty theft. And it was in and out of jail, in and out, court appearances. I couldn't even bear that.
Was Yusef suicidal at some point? And did you have to, at some point, let go of him in a way for your own mental health or your own survival?
Of course, I was frightened of suicide, although he didn't express that as much during this early period. After his father died and he was missing for 3 years, he ended up in Northern California.
And did you contact him and he was happy to come back or stay connected?
Well, he at that point now is in and out of jail. Only once I went to see him because it was a horrible experience just to see him, in the jumper. He's not that person. He wasn't a street kid, marathon running and golf. But it happens to the best of us. And it was rough.
Yeah.
But we did find him after 3 years. And ultimately, after he was released, I had already done a lot of research and had a folder, because what I learned at NAMI is that you can give all the advice. They're not going to be ready until they're ready, because they dealt with dual situations, drug addiction and mental illness, because the two combined together is just a royal mess. And what was suggested was you do your research, you find out different programs, whatever, you keep a folder. And when they express that they need help, then you say, hey, try this. So that's what I do. However, it was hard because he was always on probation.
Yeah. I don't even like asking this, but I feel like it's important.
Mm-hmm.
How did Yusuf's life end?
He took his life. He had been out in the street for all those years after his father died. And we would talk. There were moments where he would call me and we'd have good conversation. I learned never to be judgmental. It was just let him talk and encourage. It was all about encouragement. So he ended up living with this woman that he met in rehab. And long story short, I learned that she was scamming him. She was a scammer, so I blocked her number. And then Yusuf figured that out and got out of the situation. But he called and I wanted to hear what his mood was, because sometimes it was just hard to have a conversation because it just wasn't coherent. So I wanted to screen the call before just picking up the phone. And he says, Mom, I really need to talk with you. And so I called him right away and he never picked up. Mm. And months went by and I just could not contact him. And the next thing I learned, on his grandfather's birthday, his remains was found at the pier. So I felt, okay, Daddy has brought him home. That's fine. I received that because I don't want him on the street anymore.
Was it a relief in some way?
Yes. And I'm not ashamed to say it. The first thing that came to my mind was he is no longer suffering on these streets. Don't get me wrong. I was shocked. I was in tears last night. That happens sometimes where I see a smile and something beautiful is happening and I wish he was here. And then the tears, a mother never stops grieving, you just don't.
Yeah. I hear you. You are the perfect expression to me of I choose more honesty, in that you are willing to share something so intimate and important with open heart and being just so vulnerable yourself. I feel like you've really allowed others to really be honest about the power and the journey of life.
I'm glad to share this story for others and encourage others to live through that crisis, because there's going to be light at the other side. And it's just the way life is. There's no balance. There's no appreciation for the good if you don't go through some crisis.
Thank you. Hi, it's Monique again. As today's episode is all about honesty, I want to share a song from my new album, You Are the Sovereign One, out August 27th. Beyond the Divide speaks to the freedom that comes from being in an honest and open place, moving out of the binary into the infinite. For more conversation about honesty, as well as a host of other inspiring discussions, be sure to join the Women Choosing More group on Facebook. And stay tuned for more information around how you can come on to the You Are the Sovereign One experience with me, beginning in September this year.
Beyond the divide, I feel so real. I commune beyond the divide. I'm chill, I'm healed, I'm used beyond the divide. I'm bursting, no thirsting, just good news beyond the divide. I'm laughing, I'm dancing, renewed.
It's time now for the Choose More Minute. So how do we go about choosing more honesty with others, in our relationships, with ourselves? Well, first and foremost, we need to feel safe to actually explore what is true for us. So I want to introduce a little exercise called Make the List. You can get a piece of paper and put a line down the middle. On one side, write, fuels me. On the other side, write, drains me. And now just start putting things that are in your life on either side of the list. Once we have an awareness of what is giving us energy and what is draining us, we are able to actually start being honest with ourselves and therefore with people in our lives. Once you've got the list, now it's time to start looking at ways you can take off everything that is on the drains me side. Get it out of your life. Now, if your husband or your mother is on the drains me side, let's look at the qualities that are happening that drain you. It might not be the person. It might be a quality that happens in your interactions with them. So be mindful of that. It's about doing more of what fuels you and doing less of what drains you. that's our episode. See you all next week, and be sure to catch me in the Women Choosing More Facebook group. Our producers are Larry Carlat and Hannah Randall, administration by Angela York, and today's episode was edited and mixed by Ronnie Mickelson. Our theme was written by yours truly. Hope you have a great week, and remember to
be the woman that you know you are. Don't you settle, girl, travel far, let's use more, let's use more, let's choose more.
boom, ba,